Before we get into this video, there are several very important things you need to know. The first is that this will be published on April the 1st, 2025, but it is being recorded and edited in the final few days of January of the same year. That means I do not possess any information about Xenoblade X Definitive Edition beyond the second trailer, and nothing about the Switch 2 beyond the reveal trailer. So you need to keep that in mind. This video is coming out one day before the first Switch 2 Direct and about 2 weeks after Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, but it was recorded long before both of them. So while everything I say here is going to line up very well with what's in those, it's not because it was recorded after them or I had any insider information or leaks. You should take all of that for what it truly is. Even more proof that I am the greatest Xeno game predictor, sexiest video game playing gamer, and most media literate human being of all time. Eventually, everyone is going to be forced to accept the truth. Secondly, this video will also not contain any spoilers for Xenoblade X or the new story in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. Even though I already know all of the spoilers, because I know everything about the series, it is not good to tell people now, because this is very shortly after the game released, and not many people will have had the time to finish it, because Xenoblade X is a very long game. As such, all you need to know is the basic outline of it, and things that were in the trailers.
Now, you do also need to keep in mind that this video is still spoilers. Just not for Xenoblade X 1's Definitive Edition. And that is because it is a spoiler, but it is not relevant to the series right now. So it will not be revealed in canon until like Xenoblade X3 or X4 or something like Xenosaga 7 or 8. This will be a spoiler for those games too. So don't watch that if you don't want to see any of those things for like one of those games maybe. You will probably forget about this video and me and everything I say here by 2040 when that game comes out, but just keep that in mind if you don't want an extra additional spoiler on top of the other spoilers that I'm not saying here. Do you understand that? Yes? Okay, good. We can start the actual video now.
Alright, I know the first thing you're jumping to here. Yes, there is a very popular theory about the real reason Earth was destroyed in X that involves things from the other Xenoblade games. That is not the theory I'm talking about here, because there are people out there who believe that theory more than me, who would be able to give a much better and more passionate explanation of that theory and its potential implications. And also, it is a popular theory. A lot of people have been discussing this basically since Future Redeemed first came out a year and a half ago, so this will be a very short and boring video that nobody would get a lot out of. Also, as you will soon see, this theory is obviously 780 million% more correct than that one could ever be. The best part about this theory is that it doesn't involve any conspiratorial thinking or headcanons, or big things changing the events we directly see on screen. It only recontextualizes things and makes them a bit more clear. Any human in New Los Angeles will tell you, and we directly see in the opening cutscene, that the reason for Earth's destruction was a battle between two giant interstellar alien empires' armadas. The Ganglion, who are just a small branch of a bigger organization, and the mysterious Ghosts. They did battle around Earth, and as such the planet took a lot of collateral damage, leading to humanity starting to escape to try and flee from the carnage. Eventually, Ghost ships were getting shot down over Earth, and because they tend to be powered by antimatter cores, those caused big explosions and massive chain reactions that eventually resulted in the planet itself getting exploded. This happens not only does every character think it happens, but we see it happen from an omniscient point of view, not even a character's memory, which means that is the actual truth, and there's no sort of mind manipulation or illusions or fakes or that kind of thing. But why did this happen? Do you know how many stars and how many planets there are in just the Milky Way galaxy alone? Why did these two alien fleets choose to fight around Earth specifically? That is where I think it gets really interesting. The game actually does pose one possibility about the Ganglion choosing Earth on purpose, but that one's probably wrong. Like, the leader of the Ganglion is a guy called Luxar, and do you think anyone whose name starts with Lux has any idea what they're talking about? No, he made that up after the fact to try and justify it. The very first shot of the opening cutscene is of one of the Pioneer plaques, which were engraved copies of this image that were attached to the Pioneer 10 and 11 spacecraft, which were launched by the United States in 1972 and 1973 respectively, which when combined with other things on the craft, were supposed to allow any aliens who found them to decipher all of the information on it and learn a bit about us, where the craft came from, and our history and culture. Is it possible that Luxar saw this craft floating through space while he was just on his way looking for a place to fight the ghosts in, saw the pictures of humans on it, figured we look like assholes who kind of have it coming, and decided to fight there on purpose? Maybe. That is 100% possible. But there is no indication that he or any of the Ganglion actually saw it in the game, so we have to assume that isn't what happened, and come up with another reason. The real reasons are actually purely cultural, and the only reason someone else hasn't figured this out already is purely because not a lot of people are very knowledgeable about extraterrestrial culture. You know how one of the big Dragon Ball memes is that they always go and find a deserted place to fight in so they don't accidentally kill people in a more populated area? Well, that's actually just considered common courtesy out in space. You'll notice that they only really started doing that kind of thing after all of the alien characters were introduced. By the time it started happening regularly, everyone knew who Saiyans were, Piccolo knew he was an alien, and going further back, obviously King Piccolo was one too, and it was later retconned that even Tien ended up having alien blood, which, as a complete aside, means Krillin is now the only remotely relevant character to the series who is actually completely human. Not quite sure what that's about, but it's pretty obvious that when Akira Toriyama was writing the original Dragon Ball series, he took a lot of inspiration from various Earth cultures when designing different aspects of it. And once he decided to make the main character into an alien, he also started borrowing aspects from various alien cultures, which is where the trend of always fighting in a wasteland away from people who would be collateral damage came from. And since a big theme of Xenoblade X is learning about and accepting people from other cultures, be they from Earth or elsewhere, the writers thought it was a good idea to accurately depict as much extraterrestrial culture as possible so that humans would be more knowledgeable and understanding of them in the future in the real world when we do eventually meet. This, of course, raises one very important question. Why did they fight around Earth as if it was abandoned? According to X's canon, there were 10 billion humans living on it in 2054, so are planets actually controlled by both the Ganglion and Ghosts so overpopulated that 10 billion people is considered not much and effectively abandoned? Well, no. There's a bit of a prime directive thing in this cultural tradition too, and that is that meddling with and affecting sentient life is to be avoided at all costs. And as you know, it's a very well-known fact that there is sentient life on every major body in the solar system. Yeah, there are some dwarf planets and a few 100,000 asteroids that don't have anyone living there, but those places are all way too small to have a big battle between two giant space fleets. They would need something as big as at least a planetoid, and well, by the time you get to the size of something like Ceres or even Charon, Pluto's biggest moon, you're already getting to places that have advanced spacefaring civilizations that there's no way they would ever want to accidentally meddle with. But we're Earth, we're humans, we're a super cool, big, advanced spacefaring civilization with zero societal problems whatsoever. Why did they choose to fight by us? Earth is closer to the sun than most of the inhabited bodies in the solar system. which means that when they were flying near to the sun, they encountered the outer ones first, saw a big interplanetary civilization combined with people from different backgrounds that were born on different bodies, all working together in perfect harmony. And when you see that from some of the bigger Kuiper Belt objects, all the way in to Jupiter and the larger asteroids, you're going to assume the entire solar system is controlled by the same federation of various worlds and civilizations from across all the planets. So they probably didn't check Earth closely and realize that we were our own completely unconnected civilization that no one from outside our planet wants to get along with for some unknown but undoubtedly incredibly stupid reason. And honestly, the reason they thought Earth was open for battle is kind of us being our own undoing. And that's because of a tradition us humans started with spaceflight, which is planting flags whenever we land on another celestial body. This tradition was of course started with the first moon landing by Apollo 11 in 1969, and was repeated on the remaining 5 Apollo landings as well. Now, nobody has set foot on anywhere other than Earth since Apollo 17, but X begins in 2054, so there's 29 more years for someone from some country to at least make it back to the moon. While back in the day, there was obviously controversy about planting an American flag on the moon 2 years after the US signed a treaty confirming that all of space was the common heritage of all mankind. At least half of the reason it was done in the first place was to stick it to the Soviets, and I find it very hard to believe that any other country that manages to land on anywhere in the next 30 years won't plant their own flag to stick it to us. Plus, knowing this country, any future US missions to the moon or further are going to do that, even if sending people to the moon becomes as routine as going to the International Space Station. God, I hope NASA still exists by the time this video gets published. Anyway, while there's actually a good chance the original Apollo 11 flag was knocked over by the force of the liftoff when the astronauts left the moon, there are currently at least 5 US flags flying there, and in the next 29 years before the Ganglion and Ghost show up, it's also pretty likely that several more flags from various countries around the world will be added. And since the moon is further from the Earth than the Earth is, those flags will be the first things from Earth that those two fleets see when they enter the area looking to see if this is an acceptable planet to fight around. The thing about flags is that, as a wise man once said,
"The sun is a deadly laser."
Wait, sorry, wrong clip. It was supposed to be this one.
There are flags and there are water.
Which means they don't do too well if they're outside in the sun for a very long time. I'm sure you've seen flags that have been flying out for a few years have become noticeably faded, and that is with the heavily restrained sunlight that manages to make it through the atmosphere. Remember, the only reason you don't instantly get skin cancer and die if you step outside for a minute is because the atmosphere is blocking a lot of the most harmful wavelengths to humans. And, you know, the thing about humans is they need spacesuits to go out in space. And that's not just protection from the vacuum or the temperature or space junk or any of that kind of thing. It's also because of the sun. Because a little known fact about space is that the sun is an even deadlier laser up there. By the time you get far away enough from Earth's surface to count as having been in outer space in the first place, you're already above most of the protective layers of the atmosphere, and by the time you make it to the moon, well, there just isn't one of those anymore. Basically, that's why a lot of pictures of astronauts where they have the outer visor on their helmet down looks like they have a giant sunglass on the front of their face, because that is what that outer visor is trying to do. That's all good for humanoid figures, but the problem is that the American flag is physically incapable of wearing sunglasses, which means all of the ones up there on the moon have been taking the full force of the sun's radiation since 1972 at the latest. And if a flag becomes visibly faded on Earth after being outside for a couple of years on a planet with a day and night cycle, then yeah, the ones on the moon are almost certainly completely bleached white by now. And anything placed after there, besides only a couple years before the Ganglion and Ghost showed up, would also be the same. So you have 2 giant armadas looking for an empty place to have their big climactic battle. They assume the entire solar system is connected in some way for good reason, and then they come near the third planet from the sun. And checking out the moon, they see a bunch of white flags on it. Obviously, that entire planet's airspace was willingly evacuated and surrendered by the rest of the solar system so they could fight there safely. It's not the humans on Earth's fault the entire Solar System Federation didn't want them around for whatever reason, and it's not even the Ganglion and Ghost's fault for making completely reasonable assumptions. This kind of thing actually happens all the time in space, and while it's considered very tragic, there's really no one truly to blame. My colleagues and I even ran into a similar situation where we were trying to take over this one planet, and its greatest champions tried to stop us. No one involved in that situation at all wanted to fight on that planet, because they were trying to protect their home, and we were trying to take it over so we could resell it at a huge markup for profit, so any severe damage to the surface or buildings on the planet would hurt the resale value. Which means we took a big gentleman's agreement and all flew off to another planet to duke it out to see who would actually gain control. Unfortunately, neither my employer nor the civilization on the planet we were attacking knew that this other planet was occupied, so we accidentally wiped out the civilization there in part of our big battle, and while we did get the planet we wanted, now we had another completely destroyed planet that we were never really able to make into anything, so we just kind of ended up having to turn it into an outpost, and the CEO of the company gave it a number and didn't even let it have its own unique name, and it was a big mess that we're still kind of paying for. I don't completely understand all that stuff, I'm just a pair of boots on the ground. Admittedly, an extremely elite and powerful pair, but a pair of boots nonetheless. Oh, you're curious about me? Well, I guess it is time to come clean. While I know everything about the other Xeno games because I'm incredibly talented like that, part of the reason I know so much about Xenoblade X specifically is because I have a lot of first-hand experience with that. My home planet is actually Mira. Bet you could never tell that. I did a really good job pretending to be human even in the earlier parts of this very video. I can't blame you humans from Earth for coming up with your own name for it because you never spoke to any of my people or our French brethren, so you'd have no way of knowing what its actual name is. But come on, you gotta think about it for a little bit. Wild, dangerous place where everything, even the plants, want to kill you? And one of the biggest regions is a massive desert? Mira is Space Australia, and I'm so glad some of you humans lived long enough to witness its full beauty. Oh, God, at least let me finish the April Fool's video.